All right, so I will eat my words on that one.
I have seen some crazy discussions in some of these forums.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Hello, this is Rocio Baeza from the GDPR Stand-Up Podcast, and you are listening to Help Me with HIPAA.
Thank you for that intro. I'm David Sims with HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT, and joining me, as always, is Donna Grindle of Carden. Good morning, Donna.
You're talking fast.
Let's get this done. Let me slow down. You know, for us Southern boys to be talking fast,
Man, freak me out.
takes a lot of work. It usually means it's time to use the bathroom.
I know, right?
What we're going to do today, and we don't have very many of these, but we're going to continue from our interview with Gary, Black Talon Security, from last week, and this is going to be number 2.
Part
deuce.
It's the deuce.
Oh gosh.
It's the double D deuce.
Yep. So we're going to do that. And now this one's interesting because this is the part where we start getting into the nitty gritty stories about what he's seeing and dealing with and all that.
Yeah, we dig in a little bit deeper on a couple of stories, but it's a continuation, and we really enjoyed the conversation. And we hope that you are enjoying it as well. So welcome to part 2.
Yep. And we do talk a little bit about MSPs, which, as we're recording this, we just had a news release that came out yesterday. Mm-hmm. No shocker here, but MSPs are still being targeted. And there's some attackers are abusing some Google DNS over HTTPS to download malware and all that good stuff. So if you're an MSP, certainly need to know more about that. But yes, we are high value targets as managed service providers. So you need to have your house in order.
You need to be acting like one.
Yeah. I mean, we have the keys to the kingdom to all of our clients. You owe it to your clients to make sure your stuff is rock solid. Don't complain because they don't take security seriously when you're not doing your own homework.
Yeah, they made a lot of money doing this once they learned to do it. So it is not going to stop.
No.
But yes, we get into that and have several discussions about those situations.
Yep. All right. So anything else before we dive in?
No, I'm good with that.
You good with that? All right, cool. So let's hear a word from our sponsors, and then we'll get into part 2 of the interview with Gary from Black Talon Security. Did you know that 83% of healthcare organizations report a strong negative impact to their bottom line after a data breach? So many doctors think that they're HIPAA compliant and have nothing to worry about. Many of those organizations thought the same thing before it happened to them. Call Carden today at 678-292-5001 so they can assess your practice and help ensure you are protected and prepared. Visit cardenhq.com to learn more.
Cybercrime is a multi-billion-dollar industry and growing. How confident are you that your computer network can withstand a cyber attack? Can you afford to take the chance that what you have today will protect you? Call us and find out if the cybersecurity in your business is something you should be concerned about, or if you can rest easy knowing your business is protected. Visit us online at securityfirstit.com. That's securityfirstit.com. And schedule a time to talk. We've talked about the IT providers, and it's something that we're well aware of and we talk about often, is making sure they spend the time to learn. And we actually had a couple of folks in our last boot camp that it's IT folks that are coming to us to learn. And, we're thrilled because I tell David we've got to do more because we kick them all the time, but then we don't offer more solutions.
Right.
But it's also a problem of I got a guy IT where I don't want to pay. I want to pay break fix because I think I can still function like I did in 2003. Mm-hmm. And also I don't need to do HIPAA schmippa. It's just telling me what to do and handcuffing me. Those things are gone. That's something people could have thought in even 2012. You could still kind of have that approach. It was going away.
Yep.
And that's really when David and I both started transitioning our business, because we saw that it was going away and that it was changing. So can you share, without oversharing,
Yes.
some cases where they have just kind of said, let me blow it off. I don't need to do HIPAA. I don't need to do this. And then realize how important it could have saved their business.
So we do a lot of breaches, and I can tell you that 90% of them, no one's had anything for HIPAA. Okay. You know what they had? That sign hanging on the wall and a piece of paper the patient signs. And that's their HIPAA policies.
Or some templates that somebody put in a 3-ring binder somewhere.
Well, we had one when we pulled the HIPAA documentation. It literally, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself, it said insert practice name here, and patients were signing it.
All the time.
There you go. All the time.
The doctor went crazy. He's like, I can't believe this. I had trusted my staff to do this, and I didn't check it myself. And it's you think it's a joke when you tell the story. People look at you like you have 5 eyes. But it's the truth. These are the types of things we see. So, look, I think the reality is we've seen everything because the scope of our business. So you look at the smaller healthcare providers, a couple offices, maybe even a single office. They have basically nothing in place for HIPAA. They have nothing in place for security. They had a firewall and antivirus, and we're good. We did a breach in the Midwest recently where the practitioners were notified by their malpractice carrier that they need to step up their game. Literally, they were told, you need to start implementing advanced cybersecurity, because there's so many healthcare providers being hit. So they called the executive of their IT company and sat him down and was like, hey, here's the letter, right? We want something done here. What do you recommend? And his exact words were, I'm a computer engineer. This is what I do. You're fine. And fast forward 2 weeks later, got taken out, right? The MSP got taken out and all of his clients, and they went crazy. They're like, we actually tried to do the right thing. We're just surgeons. We asked the right questions. We were, basing our decision off what we were told. So I think the important thing to understand is you have to be an independent thinker, right? If you're just going to rely on someone telling you what to do, that's not an expert in that field. In my mind, you're setting yourself up for success. For failure. Yeah. That didn't quite work.
Well,
anyway.
It's like
that gets back to
you're setting Gary up for success.
Yeah. Trust them. Yeah.
But that does get back to that overconfidence thing, and so many cases they think that, they're not technical. They don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
And granted, I've seen plenty of that, particularly with cases where we go in after they've had HIPAA consultants there. Well, their privacy program, that's taken care of. But those people then said, you need to talk to IT about all these other things.
Right.
That they don't know. And so then the IT provider goes, you're good.
Yeah.
We got you.
That's a huge challenge, Donna. And I would say a very high percentage of healthcare providers suffer from that right now. Mm-hmm. They're by nature, they're fantastic people that are too trusting of what they're told. But in the end, as I said earlier, when the breach occurs, the IT company doesn't own it. You know this better than I do. The practice owns it. The doctors own it. And that's a challenge. I think there's, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. There's just a lack of information and education. And frankly, people don't think about this until what you said before is their friend had it happen, right? The practice one floor down or one building over, or they linked up with a friend at a national meeting. They're like, oh, we've been down for 2 weeks. We got hit by ransomware. But then there's the 90 other percentage of practices that don't even discuss it, right? Everyone signs a non-disclosure. We can't talk about this. We're going to make this go away. We're not reporting it. We can't afford this. And there's all those. So, the amount of under-reporting is off the charts.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
And that is a huge problem. And it's hard to enforce. And it puts all of us in, and David and I think just last week, or the episode came out today, we were talking about the fact that we're aware. And anytime, many times I'm involved in stuff, and we all know it, once it's under privilege and you're called in, your hands are tied. You come in, you take the information, you provide your expert opinion. That's it. You're done.
Right.
That conversation never happened. But there is one story that you told me about a doctor that brought you in because he's got a guy, couldn't solve the problem. And it turned out that it was one of those cases where the MSP was trying to hide it. And he's like, oh, but he's my friend. And, I've been with him for 15 years. I don't think you're, so just tell a little bit about that one, about how the doctor was shocked by his friend's lack of understanding.
Yeah, look, I think the I have a guy concept is probably more prevalent than most people realize. It's a friend, it's a colleague, it's a son, a daughter, someone that works for a big Fortune 500 company in IT, and they show up, once a month. They have no insurance. We've gone through that. They have, basic computer skills at best. So, that's the challenge here. They were really good friends. They were hit by a pretty significant attack that took out their entire infrastructure. And a majority of these attacks we're dealing with right now, Donna, every single device gets hit, right? Because they have the ability to move laterally across the network. We kept explaining to the doctor, look, you have a major issue here, right? You're not going to just magically make this thing go away. And the doctor was out of Texas, and I said, look, you can either do it right the first time and have a clear understanding of what happened and whether you have any potential long-term liability, because a lot of times this stuff rears its ugly head down the road, or you can just make this go away and pretend it never happened. I'm like, I never advise that. I'm like, every morning you're going to wake up and wonder, did my patient data get stolen? And that's what's going to happen if you don't conduct an investigation. He's like, I just can't do that to my friend. I was like, look, I get that. But this is your practice. This is your reputation. You've had a practice in this town for 20 years. The second this gets out, it could be game ending for you. What are your patients going to say? So, in the end, he chose to do the wrong thing in my mind. He didn't want to, investigate it. He didn't want to understand what happened. And I also explained to him, if you don't understand how they got in the first time, in 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, whatever it might be, you're going to be back in the same situation. Like, you got to understand what's going on here. These hackers can scan millions and millions of networks in hours, right? And if you're not fixing the holes on your network, you will find yourself victim a second time and a third time. You look at the statistics. If you don't take corrective action on your vulnerabilities and figure out how they got in, you will be hit again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we tell them over and over and over.
We just finished off a breach case for a physician in the Midwest, and this was his second ransomware attack in 3 months. And he was another one. He had a single IT person that did this part-time. He fixed the first ransomware attack and kind of made that go away. And then he got hit a couple months later, and that's when he had to file with his insurance. And then they realized, yeah, this is a big deal because the guy never patched the vulnerability to begin with. That's why he got hit a second time.
Yeah, and physicians, you would think they would get the concept that, if all of a sudden I have broken a leg and I don't know how that leg was broken, it's just broken.
Yeah.
Do I just put a cast on it and don't try to figure out how it was broken? Do they have some disease? Is there a problem? Do they have, that's, you don't just have a patient present with something with no apparent reason and then just let it go.
Right.
They wouldn't do that to their patients, but that's what they're doing to their network.
That's right. And we talked a little bit about some of the tools and things like that. And we hear that a lot. Then the practitioners will call us, be like, hey, we had a ransomware attack. We were breached. We need your help. And then if they opt not to go with us, often, we'll call back and say, hey, what's going on? They're like, oh, my IT vendor came in and they ran antivirus software and they said the ransomware is gone. Like, all right, explain to me how that works, because that's a new one to me. But
how did it not catch it the first time?
Yeah, it didn't work the first time, but it absolutely works the second time, right?
Yeah.
All right, because antivirus stops ransomware. That's why we never have ransomware attacks, clearly. So, and that's a challenge, but it's tough, because you and I and David also, we want these businesses to do the right thing and make sure that they're not setting themselves up for medium or long-term failure. And I think many of them that opt not to do the right thing are just improperly advised, or they just want to bury their head in the sand and be like, oh, I'm fine, everything's good, I'm fine, go back to business. And but
I don't have time to mess with this.
Yeah, but I have to believe that has to be weighing on their shoulders every day. Is this going to happen to me again? Did I make the right decision? Did I not make the right decision? For me, that's just me, I'm super type A. That's what would be running through my head. Crap, did I make the right decision here or not? Am I going to wake up tomorrow and have this happen again, or should I have hired, organizations to mitigate this properly? So.
Oh yeah, I mean that's probably why the three of us run our business that way.
Right.
And don't understand that, how can you just ignore your business? I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. And, we're trying to get the message out that, yes, we're help me with HIPAA, but this is a business problem. This is a business risk. And HIPAA happens if you follow HIPAA and do a really good job at it, make a consistent effort. That's really all you have to do. You'll at least be prepared and understand when things happen, what you should do. What are the right things to do? You'll be prepared. And in a lot of ways, potentially be able to prevent it from happening. Right.
And I think you bring up a really good point, Donna, because I have yet to walk into any type of data breach where there's been any plan whatsoever. It's literally the deer in headlights syndrome. Everyone is looking at one another in the business or practice. They expected this person to have an answer, or in a lot of the cases that we deal with, unfortunately, the managed service provider is the ground zero of the attack, right? And then they perpetuate the attack through the MSP's tools and launch an attack against all their clients. So their plan, when you interview the owners of the business or the physicians or dentists, they'll say, you know what, our plan was to call our managed service provider or IT company. They were going to help us, but they're obviously not available because they're a victim of the attack too. So
how many of those cases do you think you've done in the last year?
So since January, we've done 6 major ones, where
the managed service provider was hit.
Yeah, where 100 or more of their clients were impacted. And then we have smaller ones. Yeah, smaller, under 100, but yeah, look, it's a huge issue. And I think I see 2 groups of managed service providers. I see the ones that actually get this problem and they understand they're a potential target. And then the others that are like, this isn't going to happen to me. I got 5 techs out in the field. There's 3 people who sit in an office, right? They're not going to find me from Russia. Really? I can go on Google and find you in about 30 seconds. You think they're not doing that over there? And they don't take it seriously. When FBI and CISA started warning everyone in 2018 in the fall that, hey, US-based MSPs are a primary target. I mean, you guys are kind of in the same business. We know that those alerts don't come from one little piece of intelligence. They come from significant intel, because I will tell you, almost all the alerts we see in briefings we go to, it comes true, right? They'll warn you, and then 2 months later, you'll read about it in the press. That happened. Why? The intelligence is good. We have this country has really good intelligence resources, and they were warning 2 years ago, this is coming down the pipe. And I made phone calls to many of the folks that I know in this industry, warning them, hey, I'm going to send you a document from the Bureau. You got to be careful about this. And some of them are like, yeah, how can you help me? Right? What do I need to do here? And others literally laughed at me. And they're like, dude, come on. Are you serious? I got 150 clients. There's no way I'm getting targeted by Russia. I'm like, all right, let's see what happens here. And then, as we all know, they started falling like dominoes, right? And some of these MSPs lost their business. Others, it takes years to recover from a PR perspective because a majority of your clients leave you. Some stay, and we've had clients that we've helped and are doing security service for them now that wanted to stay with the original MSP, and whatever, that's their decision, right or wrong. And
well, yeah, I mean, and the MSPs themselves,
mhm.
they, there's the case where as soon as it happened in California last year, the MSP just shut down. They literally just
Yep.
became unavailable. And there are so many cases where, well, I'm going to count on my IT vendor to do everything, even though I've never discussed it with them. And it never occurs to them that the IT vendor could be hit as well. And if the IT vendors aren't preparing for it, then you've got this vicious cycle where I can guarantee every one of those IT vendors probably argued with a physician practice over not meeting their HIPAA requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They went in and said, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You should be buying this from me. They didn't really understand it. They were selling somebody else's tool, but they weren't taking care of their own house.
I see that all the time, just in the forums where they're complaining because, I've got this dental office and they won't do X, Y, and Z right and blah, blah, blah. And then if I say something like, well, have you done the HIPAA stuff internally for yourself? Well, no. Oh, okay. What are you complaining about? You're doing just as bad as your client.
It's hypocritical.
Right.
Yeah, it's exactly.
It's hypocritical. Ha!
Yeah. But no, Donna, I mean, I think this is a tremendous challenge in this industry right now. These attacks against these managed service providers that aren't trying to do the right thing. Look, nothing's 100%. So if you're an MSP and you've hired an outside firm to come and analyze and audit, all your security stuff, okay, you're doing the right thing. And David, to your point, I had a owner of an MSP literally trash me or try to trash me on LinkedIn saying, hey, if you're an MSP, if you work with an MSP, they have to be careful because they're being targeted. And he's like, oh, well, you're making an example out of an MSP that was hit and they didn't have multi-factor authentication turned on. I was like, all right, hold on a second. It just happened. How do you know that? Right. And secondly, you can beat MFA, right? We know it's possible. There are plenty of people that on their phone, right, when their MFA goes off, they think their app just needs to be refreshed and says accept, and I'm good to go, right? And there's another phishing email that was just released about a week ago designed to trick people into giving up their MFA code, right? So the second they authenticate, an email goes out. It looks like it's an alert, to punch in your MFA code. It's not coming from the real application, right? And they punch in their MFA code. The hackers get the MFA code and instantly log in. So, these people that are relying on a very specific piece of technology to protect their business, the MSP business, they're very mistaken. And David, you've probably seen this too. And it's, once again, going back to this arrogance, it's not going to happen to us and all these other things. So one of the most important things we tell a lot of clients is do your due diligence on who you're working with, right? Because if their system gets breached and they have connections back to your network, you are going to get hit. That's the ultimate attack vector, if you think about it. There's a specific, and I don't like to give them credit on these types of forums, there's a specific threat group out of Russia. That is their entire business model. They make hundreds of millions of dollars in targeting MSPs and then targeting their clients. And if you really critically think about it, it's the perfect model.
Oh, right? Especially if they don't hit them all at once. They do it a little here and there using that back end.
Yeah. And if they don't know, or they launch a single attack and literally take out thousands of computers. I mean, even if you look at these smaller attacks, if you're an MSP and you have 100 clients and you service the smaller market, let's just say on average, you probably say I'm about right, 12 computers, right? And maybe a server for a small business. You take out 100 of those clients, you've just destroyed 1,200 devices, right? 12 computers times 100 businesses, 1,200 computers wiped, right? And this threat group from Russia, that's all they do. And they pretty much guarantee 100% strike on their attack. So one of the attacks we dealt with out in the Midwest last year, the end of last year, they hit every single device. We worked with about a dozen victims there, and we only found one computer out of all those businesses that wasn't hit. And, we couldn't really figure out why that machine wasn't hit. So, I mean, that's what they do. It's highly, highly effective. And to your point, Donna, how do you recover, often as a managed service provider from that type of event? And going back to what I was starting to say, we got a little off track here, but as a healthcare provider, business owner, et cetera, you need to start asking these questions, right? And this is your life, Don, right? Ask the hard question. What, Mr. or Mrs. Business owner of the IT company, what are you doing to protect yourself? And if the answer is, yeah, I'm not really, sure. I have some security guys that work under me. They do all this.
That's proprietary information, Gary.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's the one I love.
Yeah.
It's proprietary.
Right. Okay. That's cool. Find a new IT company. Right. But the IT companies that actually get what's going on here, they're taking hopefully they're taking the proper precautions. We secure a lot of these IT companies now because they're seeing their colleagues getting whacked.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't want to lose their 20-year business over something like this. And then the other thing I say is, how can they even have enough insurance? You think you're going to get an insurance policy that's going to cover 100, 200, 500, 1,000. I mean, we secure, MSPs that have, 1,000 plus clients. If every single one of their clients got hit, that's going to be rough for them, right? If a couple get hit, okay, your insurance is probably going to cover that, even if they'll pay out. We've also had MSPs that have cyber insurance. They have decent policies, but their policies don't cover their clients, even if they're the primary entry point of the attack.
Even if in their BAA, it says they will be responsible for covering the cost and have insurance and all those things, but nobody checks that part.
Yeah. No doubt. So it's, I think there's definitely things that people and owners should be doing of these managed service provider companies. Some of them are definitely doing and attempting to do the right things. And I think other people literally are going to Vegas every day and rolling the dice and trying to figure out what, am I going to hit big today or not?
One of the biggest problems I'm seeing from a client perspective is the referral system in play where, somebody's like, well, I'm using XYZ IT company because 3 of my other doctor friends are using them. They have to be doing everything right, because they've got a dozen other clients that are in healthcare. They have to be doing this right. And I'm like, that's a huge assumption. Just because everybody else is using them, quote unquote, everybody else, it still doesn't mean they're doing everything right.
Yeah. You're assuming that those people that came before you actually vetted them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see that as being a big problem too. It's crazy because they don't want to do the work. Like, I don't want to do the work of vetting somebody. So let me just assume that my friend vetted them and just, take the referral.
Well, that's why I love when an IT provider, when we meet them, and so many of them, a client brings us in, and for some reason, everybody starts hiking their leg all around the network, and I'm like, look, I'm supposed to confirm you're doing your job. If you're doing your job, I'm going to make your client happy with you. If you're not doing your job, don't you want to know that you should be doing more? And, and I love it when IT providers that we work with, they say, look, we'll tell our clients, you don't want to assume I'm doing my job. You want somebody else checking because we are, how your business operates. And I think if it's just education, like how we can teach people to start asking, I think a lot of it is us educating the MSPs, but in a lot of cases, the market's not going to move until the clients themselves start to push and not assume.
Yeah, it's got to be a grassroots effort. I completely agree. That's what changes, businesses. When the client, you either start losing clients or they start demanding things. And I think you nailed it, Donna. Absolutely.
That's why I love the MSPs who do their own audits on themselves. I'm going to come in. I'm going to come into a medical practice, and I'm going to give you an IT audit. Well, they call them HIPAA audits. We know that's not really what it is. And I'm like, okay, so why are you having to audit yourself if you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing? And are you going to actually audit yourself, or are you just going to run some tool and say here?
You're right, David. I mean, we see this all the time, and Donna, I'm not going to mention the brand name, but you probably have seen these too.
Yeah,
David knows them.
We don't want to talk bad about because we like rapid fire tools. We don't want to talk bad about them.
Point well taken, but they hand the doctor a report that this piece of software ran and be like, the system says you're HIPAA compliant, you're good, right? We did a breach about 9 months ago where when we asked for some of the HIPAA documentation, they're like, well, here's my report from my IT vendor. We passed. So,
Yeah.
I mean, without getting into all the details, you guys clearly, I think most people understand that's not really HIPAA. That's a little piece of software running some tests that often have incorrect information.
But I have a badge I put on my website, Gary.
Yeah. We had a client on Monday call me and said, hey, I want to work with a billing consultant. So I was like, and she's like, but I'm really, really concerned about the way they're logging into my system. So before I sign up with them, can you call them? So I had this long conversation with the head of security there. And literally the first thing out of their mouth was, we have a HIPAA compliant VPN. I'm like, okay. I said, I've been doing this for years. I'm like, I've actually never heard of that before. Please explain that to me. What is a HIPAA compliant VPN?
Yeah.
So literally dead silence on the line. And I said, look, I want this to work out for all of us. I want my client to be happy. But if you're going to get on the phone with me and you're supposed to be in charge of security and you're telling me that you have a HIPAA compliant VPN, I'm not an end user. I'm going to call you out on that. And she's like, well, I don't, I was told by, the owner of the company, that's what we tell everyone. I'm like, okay, but you got to understand here, I'm going to have to go back to the client and recommend that they don't use you because you can't answer some of the basic questions. And then I said, well, what do you do for HIPAA training and for audits? And well, we have a whole in-house solution. I'm like, okay, well, who drew up your HIPAA plan? Well, my boss did. I said, okay, what experience do they have? I don't know that. But the problem is, going back to what we've been saying, they can feed that line to the end user, and a majority of them are going to accept that. Yeah. Oh, I spoke to them. They have a HIPAA compliant VPN. Well, that sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, that's one of the first rules of vetting a vendor. If they tell you they're HIPAA compliant or HIPAA certified, run.
Yeah. What does that mean? So, yeah, but I think that's the thing, Donna. Companies like the three of ours have to start helping people understand that they have to help push the needle. It has to be a grassroots effort. They have to start asking the tough questions, because if you look at the cost of these breaches from a compliance standpoint, if you look at the mitigation costs from a cyber perspective and forensics, it's crazy. Most of the cases we're dealing with, you start at six figures, regardless of the size of your healthcare entity.
And keep in mind, they're going out of business or seriously damaged for years, and many of them aren't even dealing with the HIPAA compliance part of it. They're hiding it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's an issue. So.
Yeah. So, but okay, I'm sure that we're going to have you back on at some point to tell some really good tales. You'll have to call us. Oh, we got to have an episode where we can talk about this one, guys.
I can go through one if you want. I got a good one we just did.
Oh, tell us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So this was the most recent breach case we did. This was a larger operation, about 200 workstations, 10 servers. They got hit by a threat group out of Russia, and the head of IT actually reached out directly to them before he decided he was, over his head with this breach. Then ended up reaching out to us, and the threat group came back and only asked for 6 Bitcoin, which we said, look, that's really low. You have 10 terabytes of data, and 10 servers, and I said that's low. So they said, can you negotiate it down for us? I'm like, sure, we'll try. If you really want to go this route, understand that it will add time to the breach. But I get it. If we can get the price down for you, that's fine. But I'm here to tell you that this is, once again, very, very low. So we actually get them down to 2.5 Bitcoin from 6.
Wow.
So, which
sounds
everyone's
suspicious.
Like, 4, right? So we do the Bitcoin, transfer to them. Literally within an hour, they turn over 10 sets of decryption keys to us. We're like, okay, this is good. And, we do our normal things to check stuff. And we start running the keys, which, in case you are not aware of this, the decryption of servers can take hours, days, even weeks. We've had some servers, because of the amount of data and their slower machines, literally have taken 10 plus days to decrypt. So we start running them, and right away we know we got a problem, right? The big server with all this data on it, the keys are fake. They literally gave us a fake set of keys. Like, for argument's sake, we had ABC, we requested DEF to make the whole key, and they gave us XYZ. There's zero chance it's going to work. So we were able to successfully decrypt the 9 servers for them. We went back to them and be like, hey, you guys gave us the wrong keys. They don't work. They're like, no, we gave you the right ones. Okay. So we ended up sending them sample files like they requested. And then they went radio silent for 24 hours, wouldn't respond. So of course, everyone's in a panic mode, right? So then finally we get a response, and the exact terminology was Big Boss says we need 4 more Bitcoin. All right. So now we're over the original demand, obviously, if you do the math. And in that case, they did, once the demand was paid, then, they did turn over the key, and, we began decryption. But there was, some significant concern at that point. So, people, the owners were basically like, well, how do we know we're not going to get scammed again? And I said, we don't. You're dealing with a criminal element. They could come back and say, Big Boss has 10 more Bitcoin, right? And that would actually probably put you in the realm of what they should have been asking for from the beginning. In this case, they ended up taking, I think it was about 6.5 when it was all said and done, but still a pretty significant amount of money. And then you add in all the other costs, and they were down for almost 10 days because the amount of files that they had, and their systems having to be restored. I mean, they did significant damage to these servers. These servers were basically unrecoverable from an operational standpoint. The data was all recovered, but the machines had to get rebuilt and things like that. So, yeah, it was. They actually did damage to the operating system, which you don't typically see. But they had persistence on the network for weeks ahead of time. So, that was a rough one.
Was it healthcare?
This one was not, actually. This one was not. Yeah, but it's. The healthcare ones are the same, they don't really care what kind of business you are. They're the type of attack and the methodologies. They're, they don't care what vertical you're in. So,
but every state has breach reporting laws.
They do,
depending on the data, obviously. But.
Exactly, depending on the data, and that's an exercise that they go through right away. What do you have? And it's always, we don't have anything. You don't have HR files? Oh, well, we didn't think about that. Yeah. You don't have tax forms? Oh, we didn't think about that either, right? So all of a sudden, you have payroll and tax forms and, identity for your employees that are scanned in, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we didn't really think about that, or this person was supposed to upload the data into the cloud, but, she just told me that she saves it on her desktop and has never erased it, right? And then all of a sudden, the game, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, that occurs. So, that's one. Then the other one we saw was the actual theft of a healthcare database. So it was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And basically what happened was they went in to see an emergency patient on a Saturday, and the doctor went to log into their EHR, EMR system, and the application returned a database error. So they called their IT vendor. He remoted in, and when he got on the server, he's like, "Hey, did someone erase the database? Because there's no database here anymore." And then he went to the backup, and he's like, "There's a problem with the backup. The backup doesn't work." So he ended up doing a little bit more research, and then he found the note basically indicating that their database had been stolen and that they had to pay a certain amount of money in X amount of time in 72 hours before they would release the data. So practitioners went into total crisis mode at that point, and they had to pay, and now they're dealing with all the HIPAA issues related to that. But this is the real world stuff. You can't say, as you said before, Don, it's not going to happen to me, because, eventually, if you look at the statistics, it will. So
maybe we need to change it from incident response to crisis response.
but David, you nailed it. That's the challenge now. If all your files are locked and no one has your data, that's a bad situation. Mm-hmm. When someone has your data, what do? And then if you look at a lot of these healthcare providers that don't have insurance and they want $100,000, how many people have $100,000 of liquid cash sitting around, right? You can't be like, hey, threat actors, hold while I get a home equity line of credit, right? Or I go to my personal banker and try and get some money. We see it all the time. People have to sell off assets in order to come up with the kind of cash, right? No one's going to front you the money. So, it's a big issue if you don't have insurance. So you could lose everything just from a timing perspective. If they strike on a Friday night and the demand is for Monday or Tuesday morning, you probably can't sell stocks, have a clear your account, and get the money wired so someone can pay that bill for you, unless, like I said, you have insurance, and that's a different story. But so yeah, I mean, we've really seen all aspects of these different types of attacks from a majority of the major threat groups that are hitting healthcare and small medium business market. So, but if you look at how sophisticated they are, I think that's the big takeaway from this. We have to understand that, right? This isn't amateur hour anymore. And that's why if you're going to play, in the big leagues, you better be able to step up, right? You can't have a JV team playing a varsity and expect to win. You need to step up your game. And I unfortunately see way too many practices, healthcare providers just not even understanding that or wanting to address it.
Oh yeah, so, it's like every day they're playing for the miracle on ice. But
yeah, that's a good way.
Yeah. Well, the other part of it too, with the healthcare providers, at least the smaller ones, it becomes a cost question a lot of times. And so they're like, how little can I pay and still protect everything?
Yeah.
And that is the absolute wrong question to be asking. And I like to tell people too that, look, when you have a good cybersecurity program, it involves people, processes, and technology. And I can sell you everything all day long, but I'm still giving you a one-legged table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You've got to do the other parts. And that's what we have a hard time convincing folks in the beginning. But once we start working with them and they start seeing it and understanding what's happening, and again, it's an educational issue, which is, why we have this podcast, is just to educate any way that we can. But the more education that we try to create, the more, the folks try to fight it in some cases, like the one that went all out. Oh, they didn't have 2FA. It's their fault.
Right.
And what we really need is one of these MSPs to come out and tell what happened. We really need it. And I do have one question on some of those, on the two you just reviewed. Did you determine how they got in?
In every case we've dealt with, we always figure it out, right? Between the forensics investigation, using vulnerability management tools to examine the devices and the firewall, et cetera, the story plays out pretty quickly. In a majority of the attacks, it takes some time because they know they wipe all the log files on the computers. But when you start doing the forensics investigations, you can see all the tools, the times, everything like that.
So how do they get in most of the time right now?
So,
what are your top way?
Well, probably the top way is RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. That's a huge one. It's interesting. I mean, obviously we're pretty heavy in the healthcare sector, but I hear a lot of people say, well, you always get attacked through like phishing emails and things like that. We actually don't see it that frequently where people get phished. I see a lot of phishing for email compromises where they give up their creds for G Suite or O365. And those products are not configured properly from a security standpoint. But we don't really see too many phishing attacks that lead to, system compromises. In almost all the cases we deal with, it's a vulnerability. It's a device that's vulnerable that hasn't been patched. It's a firewall that's improperly configured, et cetera. And that's
a server that's been configured to be wide open because no one's paying attention.
Yeah. I mean, you have VPN issues, right? We all know what happened back in the January timeframe where NSA, for I think the first time in their history, came out and be like, almost every VPN is potentially vulnerable unless you patch. And there are still businesses that haven't patched and they still get hit, right? Because there's this disconnect.
Now you mentioned RDP, and I know most of the IT people are like, yeah, but I run my RDP through a VPN, so I'm good.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people do that. So, so look at what we just talked about. I mean, you can compromise VPNs. People's credentials can get hit. What happens if you hit a computer at a potentially a remote site and then use the VPN to move to, the server at another physical location? That's an issue. People don't think about endpoint compromise. That's the problem. We see that's the reason we saw this huge increase in attacks because of all this remote access. What if the endpoint at someone's house gets compromised, right? And there are tools that are on that computer that can move through the VPN to the corporate environment, to the physician's office, wherever, and launch attacks that way, right? We don't think about that.
Yeah, because home computers, they're secure. If nobody's looking for your business, they're not looking for your home.
Right. And then, you have credential issues. You know how many people's credentials? Well, there's like 1 billion sets of credentials out there right now that you can gain access to. And we all know that. I mean, we've all probably either read stories or know people. They're like, how did they get in? I use a really strong password. Well, use the same password as a website that got hacked a month ago. They used a credential stuffing tool to gain access to your device, or your account. So I think, David, the point being is, when we look at these issues and we say we're using this piece of technology to protect me, like your VPN, and I know where you're going with this, we have a problem, right? The second you bet your entire livelihood on one piece of technology, you're going to have a problem. That's the reality of it. And I think that the big takeaway from this presentation is there is so much money being made by the criminals right now. They are going to, they're spending an unbelievable amount of money, right? And leaving no stone unturned to try and figure out how to get onto these networks, because they know, the value of the data. And then from a business continuity standpoint, they know businesses are going to pay. We haven't had a single client that's hired us where we said, you got to pay the ransom, hasn't paid, because they got to get their data back. You can't lose all your x-rays and patient records. Like, you're going to pay. Everyone's like, I'm not paying. I'm like, okay, what's the option? Tell me, teach me. Like, what else do we do? Well, the police department or the FBI told me not to pay. I'm like, of course they're going to tell you that, right?
No, but we have good backups. We have great backups that we don't know if they actually work, because we talk about this all the time on the show, but people need to stop looking at it as, I'm purchasing backups. You're purchasing the ability to recover your data. So why aren't you testing that instead of testing whether or not the backup actually just moved data somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, one of the big MSP breaches we dealt with, and I never like to mention brand names, but they had an extremely high-end backup solution in a lot of their offices. I would say 75% of these practices, healthcare providers, had very expensive backup solutions that also backed up to the cloud. Every single one of those had compromised systems. Their solutions weren't able to recover the data, right? And if I mentioned the name, you'd absolutely know these as one of the more prestigious ones. And to your point, David, they bet the farm on that, and they lost, unfortunately. And it's beyond saddening to see this happen to them, because you watch them process that they're losing their entire business of years and all the hard work they put in. And it's once again, it is this stuff's preventable for the most part, because how the hackers work. For the most part, they're opportunists, right? Because there's so many networks they can knock over, but at some point they're going to give up, right? Unless there's a really good reason why they want in that network. They're going to knock. They're going to kick, right? They're going to hit it with a little battering ram. And if it doesn't open, they move on to the next network.
You just have to be better than the next guy.
You do, right?
That's it.
You really do. And I think that's the point. And this whole concept, I think this is where you're going with this, David. Maybe I'm wrong, but this whole concept of, what if I just use the VPN? Well, if you just use the VPN, you're going to have a tough conversation with your clients and maybe for your own business at some point. But if you start layering in these technologies, multi-factor and vulnerability management and penetration testing, right? And then looking at the core of your employees and making sure that they're trained and they understand the types of threats that can present through email and internet usage. And you start doing all these things, then look, you're actually trying to do the right thing. And you can sit back as an owner, right, physician of that practice or business and say, you know what, we're trying to do the right thing. And that's the goal here, right? And I think the three of us are all on the same page with this, which is you got to do something, right? And relying on this antiquated technology, it just doesn't cut it anymore. I mean, if you look at almost all the ransomware attacks, the newer code that's out there, you know what the first thing they do? They shut the AV off. They have a kill AV, command line that goes in and basically terminates or shuts these services down. Even if the AV was capable of picking it up, they snip the power and the phone lines to your house, and your alarm can go off and no one cares, right? The police aren't coming. So that's the challenge that we see also. So
yeah, I think we could probably do another whole episode on just the preventative measures. 'Cause I think everybody that's listening, if you're taking this seriously, you're probably like, oh crap, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
And, and we're going to leave you with nothing. We're going to bring Gary back for that.
Yeah. Look, and I agree that's a great conversation to have, because as I just alluded to, you can do stuff, and if done right, you can put up very, very good defenses. So.
And they don't have to be the throw a bunch of money at it kind of defenses either. I mean, it's, technology, people, and processes. So all of this, a small office needs to have a SIM and, multiple layers of AI and behavioral analytics. And, what people come in and try to sell them.
Right.
But I have absolutely enjoyed having you join us, and we'll definitely have further conversations. But, I guess the demand will be for how do I prevent this? What little things can I do that make a big difference? What's the best bang for my buck? So we'll get that on your calendar, Gary. And
I would love to do that. Sounds great.
So we didn't get you to provide your contact info, how to reach you and the team at Black Talon Security.
Sure. Yeah, I gotta throw that in there now. So best way, if you want to hit us up online, it's blacktalonsecurity.com. If you want to call us and talk to us, it's 800-683-3797. And we'll be happy to discuss your needs. And keep in mind that one, as you mentioned, Donna, it's not a one size fits all type solution, depending on the size of your organization. Security is scalable, right? You're not going to try and deploy a solution that a Fortune 500 company would use, in a healthcare provider with 30 computers, for instance.
And I think we're going to see more of that, where everybody's lost their job and now they're going to go out on their own. And David, frankly, is already seeing it.
Oh, yeah.
And where they're going to put in this enterprise setup in these small environments, and somebody else handled security. They weren't even aware of what they were doing, so they're not going to do the security piece. And it's a big difference. You've got compliance, IT, security, 3 different things. You need them all.
Right. Yep. You nailed it. It was great.
I
had a great time with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, great having you on, and we look forward to speaking with you again, so you can not scare us so badly, but tell us what we can do about it.
All right. Exactly.
All right,
bring you back up, right? So,
all right, Gary, thanks so much. I look forward to talking to you. I've got some stuff to discuss with you anyway later.
All right.
But take care, and good luck in managing power and all those cool things after the storm.
Right. No problem. David, Donna, great chatting with you. This was super fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Don, I don't know about you, but interview was interesting, to say the least, and scary. We could have probably saved that for the end of October.
Well, the thing is that we say those things are happening, and, he's actually going in where it has happened and is fixing it.
Right.
Or trying to fix it, or trying to repair the damage.
Well,
if you can't take it from the person who's having to fix it that it's actually happening, we can't help you.
Yeah. Well, he goes into a lot of the same things that we see all the time with the way people have the "it won't happen to me" syndrome. And, they think that, oh, this is happening somewhere else, it's not happening here, or it's happening in other industries, it's not happening here. Well, we've got it covered.
Yeah, I got this. Trust me. I know what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. I've got a guy that works here who's a IT wizard, whatever. There's all kind of things. And, the point really is not, do you have it covered? Do you not have it covered? The point is, are you always questioning yourself and your stance on privacy and security? Because you should be.
You should always be looking.
Yeah, because what worked today is not probably going to be working tomorrow, because people are actively trying to figure out ways around everything you're doing today to protect yourself. And so if you're putting something in place and you're just, set it and forget it, then you're not doing very good at all.
Yes.
So just keep those things in mind. And if you've outsourced to somebody, ask the tough questions, because if they get ruffled and rattled because you're asking those tough questions, I would be concerned about that.
Well, as Gary mentioned, people don't know the questions to ask, and that's why we've done multiple episodes on vetting your vendors, vetting an IT company, questions to ask an MSP.
Mm-hmm.
We've done all of those, and some of them have great lists, and there's also the NIST standards that came out, the NCCOE Give It to Your MSP list.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that you don't have to understand it. You want to see their answers. And if you're getting weird answers, please send them in, because I want to know.
Yeah. And, a good other red flag is the whole baffling with BS.
Yeah.
If your MSP can't really speak to you in English.
Or they just say, I am a professional, I've got this covered, and give you the paperwork back, like Gary's example. I want to see you give me an explanation.
Mm-hmm. How dare you question my authority?
All right, that's a good one.
Yeah, we'll end on that. All right, that is our show today, folks. Remember to follow us and share us out on your favorite social media site and rate us in our podcasting app. We do need your help to keep spreading the word about HIPAA and those things we talk about. So remember, for Donna and myself, HIPAA's not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.